Okay, so now I'm going to talk about cognition. And cognition is pretty much the parts of your brain that deal with information processing. That has to do with things like memory, language, and problem solving. So I'm going to talk about each of these little things and more in this unit. Alright, so now I'm going to talk about memory, and I'm sure you know that memory is basically the brain's ability to hold information no matter how small or big it is. According to the modal model, there's going to be sensory, short-term, and long-term memory. I'm going to talk about sensory memory now. That's the absolute shortest amount of memory that really even qualifies as memory. So that's like, say, you're seeing someone jump roping, and then the jump rope is going around really, really fast just for a split second. It's in your mind, and then you essentially forget about it. You don't think about it anymore. That's sensory memory. It's kind of the balancing point between mere perception and memory. It's in your memory, but just for a split second. There's two types of sensory memory, iconic and echoic. Iconic is going to be the visual, and echoic is auditory. And the echoic lasts for a little bit longer in your sensory memory, just like 3 or 4 seconds, as opposed to the iconic, which is just tenths of a second. Visual persistence, that kind of goes along with the jump roping example again. It's also kind of like if you see a fan, the blade is going around and around so fast, and it just kind of looks like it's one constant blur. That's visual persistence, and this goes along because it's just like a fraction of a second. You barely even see it. Alright, so now I'm going to talk about short-term memory. Short-term memory holds information for just about a few seconds to up to a minute usually. On average, give or take a couple items, it can hold about 7 items. That's kind of handy for things like telephone numbers. That's part of the reason there's 7 numbers. There's a few different ways that we can hold information into our short-term memory for at least a little while. One is maintenance rehearsal. So that's like if you get a telephone number and you just keep repeating the number over and over to yourself so you can remember it. That's maintenance rehearsal. Elaborative rehearsal, that's when you apply a concept to better encode the information. Say you're trying to learn someone's name and then you rhyme it to a distinctive feature of them, something like that, like you create a scenario. That's maintenance rehearsal. Chunking is another strategy to remember short-term information, such as a phone number or a social security number. Like a phone number is put into a group of 3 numbers and then a group of 4 numbers. That's because it's easier for us to remember that rather than just a straight set of 7 numbers. Some other information that you're going to want to know, some vocab terms are encoding. That's basically just when the memory gets, or the information gets into your memory. This can be hindered, however, by something like interference, where, say, in retroactive interference, when you learn new information, that pushes out old information. Proactive is the opposite, where old information is proactively interfering with new information that you're trying to learn. Decay also is just the passage of time. That's when new information gets out of your short-term memory, or even long-term. The serial position effect, one final vocab word that you just kind of want to know, is basically when you're looking at a list of anything, just a list of names, numbers, etc., and you're asked to recall them. Generally, the ones that you're going to forget are in the middle. You're going to have an easier time remembering the names, numbers, whatever, that were at the beginning and the end of the list. Kind of respectively, that's known as primacy, remembering the first items, and recency, remembering the last items. Alright, so the last type of memory that I'm going to talk about is long-term memory. As you might imagine, long-term memory is just all the memories that kind of stay with you for a while or forever. These can kind of be split into 2 main parts. There's episodic memory. That's memories of like specific events, such as your first day of high school or your wedding day, just kind of being in certain situations, that sort of memory. Whereas semantic memory is kind of general knowledge, facts, word meaning, things like that. That's semantic memory. Procedural memory is things you don't really even think about. They're kind of more in your subconscious. That's like directions for driving to school. That would be procedural memory. It's still in your long-term memory, though. Implicit memories are related to procedural memory. those are memories that you can't really consciously draw up. They're just kind of in there. Um, Explicit memory is something different. It's kind of just the opposite. That's when you consciously can recall information. Say you're taking a test. That's part of semantic memory as well. You can specifically kind of just draw it up. Source amnesia is when you can't remember the source of something. You kind of attribute it to something that seems to make more sense to your brain, such as where you read a certain newspaper article, say, and you don't remember where you read a certain piece of information. So you say, oh, I read it in a magazine. Just remembering, not being able to remember where it was from is an example of source amnesia. Reconstruction is basically when you kind of work to get your memory to explain something that you don't actually know. Say in court cases, eyewitness accounts can be unreliable because of reconstruction, where say you're being exposed to the news or something, or other people telling you information that's not actually true, and your memory kind of just makes sense out of that. It's like, oh well, I guess that is true. I didn't. That seems to be what actually happened when it might not have been. So that's reconstruction of your long-term memory.